I'm going to kick off by going around to each person that we've got on our little panel today to talk a little bit about who they are, what Fashion Revolution team they represent, and what money, fashion, power, means to you, maybe your thoughts on the zine and also the Fashion Revolution theme as a whole. So I'm going to start with Fashion Revolution India.
Good evening, everyone, because we're all in different time zones. So for me, it's evening. Thank you, Ruth. It's really exciting to be here. My name is Mankiran Dhillon. I'm representing Fashion Revolution India. I think what money, fashion, power really represents is, I think, the whole system and the processes that are running in the back end. I think that is what it is putting forth. It is bringing an interactive learning process. I think through the book, I think everybody would agree, we've learned a lot around it. So really looking forward to the discussion here.
Thanks, Mankiran. And next to Turkey.
Mankiran.
Hello, everyone. My name is Irem. I'm the country coordinator of Fashion Revolution Turkey. Today, I'm here with my printed copy, actually, of Money, Fashion, Power fanzine, which I got in 2017. When I first read it 5 years ago, it confused me a lot because it was saying that the words we love very much in our daily jobs, such as low costs, large volumes, quick lead times, might have some other meanings like unpaid overtime, forced labor, and poor working conditions. I was thinking that if I do my job in the way that I learned at the university and the way my managers told me, I can be very successful. But then I realized that there is something wrong in the system itself. And this fanzine helped me a lot to see what it is by showing the effect of our success criteria on the people's lives. So I'm very happy to be here with you today, talking about one of the guides which has changed my perspective on my job, and looking forward to hearing all your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, let's go to Nigeria.
Hello, everyone. My name is Modupe, and I'm representing Fashion Revolution Nigeria. I'm the communications coordinator of the Nigerian team. And reading the book, I mean, a lot of times we tend to ignore what goes into making things as close as basic as a t-shirt. And in reading the book, I just realized that the weavers, spinners, garment workers are somewhat invisible in the supply chain, and I think this is why they tend to live in poverty, because it's as though they are not recognized, like they don't exist. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to hearing other thoughts from. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, let's go to Argentina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica. I live in the city of Buenos Aires, and I'm country coordinator of Fashion Revolution Argentina. And I think the design, I'm surprised by the validity that it has after 6 years. I see how little have changed. I think that we need to get everyone to start linking their favorite clothing brand with the monopoly group that concentrates power and wealth. I guess this is very important in this point because the people just, it's really complicated to connect all these two words and try to recognize this huge problem.
Absolutely. Now let's go to Scotland.
Hello, I am Mary Beth. I'm the country coordinator for Fashion Revolution in Scotland. I'm totally delighted to be here with everyone today. The Money, Fashion, Power zine, for me, really pulled together the overarching problems that there are across the board, but also validated that everyone has their battle within this in a small way. There's a sentence in one of the articles that says solutions require nuance and understanding of the forces of both global and local economics and politics. And I think that element of there's a different niche area that is going to mean so much for us to make progress, and kind of echoing what Jessica said, it's very complicated, but if we can all support each other in our local environments as well as on an international level, I think that's where we're going to start seeing a lot of positive progress.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Now let's go to Singapore.
Hi everyone, it's 9:37 in the evening here in Singapore. So good evening, everybody. My name is Singh. I represent Fashion Revolution Singapore. And I only read this zine early this year when it was made open source. I wish I read it earlier. Things that would have been so much clearer for me, especially when, I was trying to figure out some of these concepts from the very beginning. What I like about this zine is that it is very accessible, very easy to read. And I think more importantly, that it is open source and free for everyone to download and to access. This is one part that I really appreciate Fashion Revolution doing. And I think the zine is like, from just from reading it and from experiencing it, it is a labor of love. And it's just amazing how it was, published in 2017 and, how far we've come now. And it's also at the same time extremely illuminating of the fashion industry. And I think a very important piece of reading. Yeah, and I'm happy that it's made free. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think we have Jessica from South Africa. I'm not sure if you're able to turn your camera on, but it'd be great to hear from you. There we go. If you could just unmute yourself, that would be brilliant. Jessica, can you hear us? Can you unmute?
Oh gosh. I'm here. Hi, sorry, hi everyone. I'm Jessica in South Africa. I am the head coordinator for Johannesburg. Thank you so much for the invite. I think the theme this year is just so timely. I think that money, fashion, power is something that people participate in every day without necessarily recognizing how we contribute into the system. And I think for us in South Africa, it's been so interesting that we literally, for this theme, taken the initiative to speak to the students in universities, because that's where you spend a whole lot of money, just as soon as you leave the nest, and just to try and help them connect the dots in terms of where you're spending your money and who you're supporting. So I think it's very timely. So I'm very excited about this.
Thanks so much. Now let's go to the USA.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you. My name is Mackenzie Mock. I'm the Director of Communications with Fashion Revolution USA. So many great points have been shared by folks. The only thing that kind of struck out to me additionally was that, this overarching theme of money, fashion, power, it shows how like two of the words can be connected and brought forward as a theme whenever you're discussing something. So money and power are intrinsically linked. You can explore conversations around fashion and power, around fashion and money. It lends itself to so many different explorations. And I think within the zine itself, there are many ways this is expressed and creatively expressed as well. So it's just a great combination of these really important themes, that are important year round, not just during Fashion Revolution Week.
Absolutely. Fashion Revolution Week is every week. Last but not least, we've got Zambia.
Hello, my name is Tombo. I am the Learning and Impact Coordinator for Zambia, and I am also a fashion designer. So this one is very personal to me. When I started in the fashion industry, I think I was 16 years old, and I didn't have this fanzine at my disposal. So Looking back and reading this book and looking back at my digital footprint was awakening, seeing how much I contributed to creating the mess that we have right now, and also how I'm contributing to changing it now as a sustainable and sustainability conscious designer, repurposing old things and being mindful of how when I decide I'm going to employ somebody, how their life is going to be affected by all the choices I'm going to make. Like hearing all the stories that we are hearing from these women in Bangladesh, for example, in the book, of their daily life and what it's like to work in very unideal environments and for low costs and low wages when they are really working to fuel the money, the fashion, the power of what we call the fashion industry today. So it's going to be very interesting for us to discuss all the little elements that make up the bigger picture. And I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's opinions.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. And yeah, it's really interesting to look back on the zine all these years later, because a lot of it is very simple issues that perhaps we've moved beyond in a lot of ways. But at the root of the issue is, the people that make our clothes are not being paid enough to live on. They don't have the power to speak up necessarily, and we're consuming too much, producing too much. So it's kind of humbling to realize that so many of those themes are still so relevant today. I wanted to open up a question to everybody, and I'll go around each panelist so we can hear from you all. How does hearing the stories of the garment worker lives and the way they spend their wages, because I think that was quite interesting with the garment worker diaries, if you're making X amount, how much you're spending on food, etc. Did it make you look at your own spending habits, perhaps how you participate in the fashion industry as a consumer, and how you interact with with money? I'd love to hear from we'll go to Mankiran first from India.
Thank you, Rose. I think after going through these processes, and also to put out that I am from India, I've been born and raised in India, so we have actually seen this, and it's not just about garment workers, but it's also about the street vendors who are selling vegetables, the rickshaw pullers, the housemaids, so there's so many of these people who we have seen since the day we were born. And while we've had that privilege, it's, I think, the whole idea of our spending habits versus theirs. So after reading through the book as well, it sort of makes you internalize the whole facts of their life versus yours, so we could possibly go out and afford a meal, which could be something that they actually have a budget for their whole month's groceries, right? So sometimes it actually makes you think, and it makes you act upon it, that survival really does not need as much as we think it does. Our needs are not as many as we've built them, because our wants have sort of shifted over to our needs, because we have that sort of leverage to purchase. So it does make you internalize, it makes you process things in a different way. And I think the only way, the only actionable that has come across, at least for me, is that having born and raised in a sort of environment where we see this, like literally as soon as we step out of our house, you do tend to become part of organizations, let's say like Fashion Revolution, and there's so many other not-for-profit organizations, non-government organizations that are working towards uplifting these sectors, upskilling these sectors. So I think that is one actionable point that you sort of process in yourself and sort of build on to actually make something better for someone.
That's really interesting, the sort of the visibility of it, because I suppose a lot of the work that Fashion Revolution is trying to do is to make these stories visible when they might not be for everyone in every country. So I suppose the zine is doing a small job of that, and it drew on the work, I'll try and share it on my screen, of Garment Worker Diaries from an amazing organization in Bangladesh called MFO, and they regularly talk to garment workers across Bangladesh to find out how their daily lives look, and making those stories visible, because these aren't people with Instagram accounts who we can watch their stories and see what they're up to. It's really important, I think, to be able to connect on a sort of human level.
Yeah, I think just to quickly add the last point here, is because we're so used to this. And when you mention visibility, because for us it is so widely visible, we sometimes forget that, making this further visible could actually bring more light to the issue, could bring some policy changes. And I think that's what the book does. And I think that is why people would like to share some stories which, from Asian countries where a lot of these garment factories are. So I think the more we share, the more there's bound to be a change soon. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm just going to go round in a clockwise circle now. Jessica from Argentina, can I go to you next?
Yes, it was something that always worried me. I was born near one of the largest clandestine clothes fairs in Latin America, and I saw by first hand how the people who sew the clothes that are sold of the fair life, the violence that these people suffered by the worker who withheld their identity documents and did not allow them to leave their workplace, which where they live, because they are foreign. As soon as I recognized the situation, I changed my habit of consumption, new clothes. And I feel that we live surrounded by a lot of injustice. Since we are born, we are immersive in this system, and I think that the most of us, it is a comfort zone. The way we living in middle class people live even in third world countries is loaded with huge profits. We need to wake up and stop supporting big monopolies that perpetuate the cycle of poverty in the people who make our clothes.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Jessica. Iram, Turkey, can I come to you next?
Yeah, actually, I'm working in textile industry. So as a textile professional, before reading the fanzine, I was, of course, aware that textile workers are some of the lowest paid workers in the world. For example, in Turkey, whenever the minimum wage or poor working conditions are mentioned in the news, in the background, they show garment workers sewing a t-shirt or jeans. But hearing these stories of garment workers, knowing her name, her daily routine, and the way she spends her money make our connection real. She's no longer a garment worker to me. She's the maker of my t-shirt, and I know by buying her habits may affect her food, her health, or her well-being. I think this is a great example of how important transparency in the textile industry is. And to me, Fashion Revolution Week is all about this transparency.
That's really interesting to think about the language as well of garment workers kind of puts us at a distance from this anonymous group, but actually, these are millions of people with families and lives and histories that, deserve to have their stories told. Mary Beth, you are next on my screen.
I thought about the term I need, and I think that this has been kind of touched on. I think especially here in the UK, we have been brought up with this concept of I need and that you're always in need of more and that you always need to have. And those things that you need to have are typically objects. They're typically things that you want other people to see for them to then have an impression of you and of your income and of your status and of your class. And we've just been brought up in this constant conversation of what you need, and it's always that need then means that you always are going to be bringing in more and more and more of these items, and we don't think of our needs in a much more intangible way. And I think that that's what we need to do, because the base level of what garment workers are buying, that's that's their needs and they cannot meet their needs. So I think as well, when we get to know on a really personal level, and when it's really broken down on a personal level of what that money means and how it can be spent and what needs to be sacrificed because it's so little, I think on a really gut level, it challenges what our perspective of need is. And I think that the more we can share that information of how money is used and how money is so limited for so many people, and on the other end, our needs are the result of that. Our needs so much of the time are fashion and footwear and accessories, and they're not true needs. And the people that are manufacturing those needs for us are not able to meet their basic human rights.
I think it's interesting too to think about the way that fashion brands make us feel that we have these needs, that it's a must have, you know, that sort of language that they use, you know, everything must go, you must have this must have item. It makes us feel like a pressure, like we're rushing to get something. But as you say, like when we stop to think about it for a second, we realize actually there's probably some maybe like deeper psychological, spiritual needs that we should be meeting first. Next, I'm going to come to Singapore again.
Thank you. I think what Mary Beth said was so impactful. I agree and I echo everything that she said. I think just to add on to that, I think what the Garment Worker Diary section really stood out for me was that it put things into perspective, in a sense that, and seeing how garment workers cannot meet their needs, like it was mentioned before and earlier, and having to take up loans to fulfill their most basic needs just because the paycheck that they take home cannot simply cannot fulfill that because they're not earning a living wage, or sometimes not even a minimum wage. I think it was for me a very visceral punch to my consciousness, and that definitely leads into my consumption habits and how I view the fashion industry as a whole. I think at the same time, it is a reminder that, a lot of us do these advocacy and activism work from a very far removed point of view. Like here in Singapore, we do not have local fashion manufacturers or large scale garment factories that are, inshore. So it's a reminder for me that, I can do all of these work and speak about it as a removed participant within, these embedded structures of the fashion system. But all of these that we are discussing are lived realities that people actually live. So yeah, that was what stuck out for me.
Yeah, I think describing it as like a punch to the stomach is really how a lot of people feel when they first kind of come face to face with this reality. Because as I think Erin was saying, the sort of lack of transparency from brands means that most people, the majority of people, it seems like there's a lot of people involved in Fashion Revolution, but when you talk, just on the street or in a bar or something, most people have no idea that this is going on. Modupe, Nigeria, can we go to you next? I'd love to hear what you thought about the Garment Worker Diaries.
So hearing their stories and seeing that they put in so much work, they work for long hours, and regardless of that, they still can't afford their basic needs. They can't afford basic amenities. It just, for me, further amplifies the question, this price at what cost? So when I buy clothes, am I paying the value? Am I getting the value commensurate to the work that has gone into it? Or am I indirectly part of the exploitation? And so I think that stuck out for me, and that really made me realize that there's a lot that goes into this. So they can't afford their basic needs, and while I'm here and I'm just, I want this, I want that. And yes, if further, yeah, like what I can't remember who said it, but the fact that we feel that we need these things, a lot of times we really don't need these things. We just think that we need them. So I feel that pressure on the garment workers because of what we feel that we need, I think it's a lot, and that results in them having to work so much and at the end of the day, they still cannot, afford to live in good conditions.
I think that's interesting that you talked about like indirectly contributing to it, because I think most people, I mean, nobody wants to buy a jacket and think I'm causing harm to somebody, nobody wants that. Perhaps some people like put it to the back of their mind, but I think most people would want to know that they're, what they're buying is made in a safe way. And yeah, it makes us unwilling investors in this system, really, that we don't necessarily think aligns with our values. Mackenzie, USA, let's come to you next.
Yeah, thank you. I had an initial reflection, but hearing everyone's thoughts makes me think about another big theme here, which is, oftentimes in the global north, we think this is an away problem and not something that's happening in our own backyard or in our own country. And, I'm finding that it would be really, really wonderful to have something like the Garment Worker Diaries for garment workers in the US, particularly in Los Angeles. There's so much work happening on the ground with policy change, with the Garment Worker Protection Act and local manufacturers, both in Los Angeles and New York, and so many other places around the world or around the country. I think, Aram, you shared it really well with a stigmatized around someone who's a garment worker that actually encompasses so many people who are garment makers and what we consider those folks to be and who they are, and bringing more amplification to them. So really expanding that, I see a lot of opportunity with hopefully being able to tell more stories in a localized way to lead to global change around the fashion supply chain.
That's really interesting. And I think, yeah, in the UK, we had a sort of a scandal of fashion manufacturing in England, which people had no idea. They thought, oh, this is somebody else's problem. But it sort of persists in nearly every country across the world. Twambo from Zambia, can we come to you next?
Sure. Reading these women's stories impacted me in the same way that it has affected everybody else, but coming from Zambia, where we have personal relationships with our tailors, we know their names. Some of them are our aunties, our grandmothers. So reading their stories kind of made me reflect back to the point that it could be your grandmother working in that factory. It could be Auntie Ruth from 2 blocks away that you always go get your jeans repaired from. These are those people. This is their story. Somebody probably before I was born was doing that to my grandmother, who used to work in a manufacturing store and all of that. So for me, it made me reflect really on making it very personal. Like, if this was your grandmother or your aunt or your neighbor, how would it make you feel that they basically just can't afford basic necessities, where for you a basic necessity is, oh no, I need Sensodyne toothpaste instead of Aquafresh toothpaste. Like, they don't know any of that. They just want the basic things for basic hygiene. Like buying your sanitary pads is something that seems almost obscure to some women in these diaries, which should not be the case. And I think it makes you really think about how little things make big things matter a lot more. It's not even about the bigger picture, it's about the little things, like a toothbrush and soap and rice and chicken on someone's table every day, where for us it's, oh no, we can just go and eat out at McDonald's every day because we simply can afford it. But these women can't, they don't have that privilege. And it all starts with understanding where your garments, where your fabrics are sourced from, knowing the background, the transparency of the whole process. I think that's the whole point of Fashion Revolution, is to open people's eyes to understand who made their clothes and also who made their fabric, because it starts with fabric waste and how much it takes to just dye a piece of cloth. So these are all the little things that I feel, we don't think about. The woman dyeing your fabric, and then the woman cutting your fabric and making it into that said t-shirt. And all those women down the line have a different job and are paid pennies. And that just really opened my mind up to those little things.
Yeah, it's really important that when we talk about the people that make our clothes, we include it further down the supply chain, where actually we do tend to find the worst levels of exploitation, labor rights exploitation, for example, in cotton growing, in textile mills. These are the areas that even the kind of mainstream fashion conversation about fashion sustainability, we haven't managed to open up yet. And that's why the sort of Who Made My Fabric campaign is important as well. I'm going to move on to another question about, obviously we're in Fashion Revolution Week, the theme is money, fashion, power. And for me, I sort of, first of all, thought about all these top line levels of where is the power in the fashion industry. But I think a lot of us don't feel that we have a lot of power as everyday people, as consumers, as citizens. Do we have power in shifting this system? Obviously, we can perhaps make different choices with where we buy from, but how much power do we have in kind of standing up against this exploitation and inequality? I know that's a bit of a big question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of where the power lies in the fashion system and how we use the power that we have. And Kieran, I'll start with you once more.
I think, like you said, that most of us do not feel that we have the power. You know, it's like every drop counts for the ocean. It's that sort of analogy that has to work here, because if you see systematic shifts worldwide, whether it's within one country or globally, have only happened when there has been large scale protests. And not to say that protests are the only way forward, but it's when every information and about an aspect is there available to the citizens, you know, they want that change to happen. And the unfortunate thing is, which I think a lot of partners here have touched on, is the fact that transparency isn't really there. So, you know, it doesn't say who has made this fabric, how much have they been paid for it, and how much are we paying for it, you know, what percentage of that goes. So I think when there is power is with the consumers, when they have that sort of awareness and knowledge. And I think that is what is hidden right now. So which is why I think transparency index becomes really important, because what are you really doing with this kind of production? Where has it been produced? You know, there's so much of rejection that happens. And then what happens to that rejected fabric or that rejected piece of clothing? Because they are not just 10 pieces, it's tens and thousands of pieces that get rejected at a go. So I think if there is more information, I think 100% of information rather, of what happens from the start of a cotton farmer growing cotton to the end of a consumer buying it, and the whole process, I think that's where the whole systematic shift is going to come in. And that's how, you know, the differences in inequalities can actually in somewhat way be balanced.
So do you feel that if more consumers, more citizens had the information at their disposal, that actually they would stand up and call for change?
Absolutely. I'll just give you a very small example. We all know plastic is bad for us, right? And I remember this pre-COVID, where we were in office and a friend of mine was using a plastic tiffin box and she's going to heat it up in a microwave. And I was just like, are you serious? Are you really going to do this? Do you know how harmful this is? And the fact is that while she's really well educated with a master's MBA degree or whatever else, it's the information of what are the side effects. It's not like you're suddenly going to eat out of it and you're going to go to the bathroom and realize you're not well. It's going to take a period of time because it's making you sick from within. And it's not good for your overall health. So I think the fact that there is no instant result in front of us is also that the impatience doesn't exist in the consumers right now. So if there is full information of what really goes on, the impact of it in numbers, in lives, in sort of earning capacity, if that's put forward, I think a layman who's not part of the corporate circle will realize that the kind of profits that these corporates make are coming out of our pockets, and the people who are actually giving them the ability to make those profits are still below the poverty line in most countries.
I think that's a really empowering way to look at it too, because it is saying, look, we are, as global citizens, we do want better. It's kind of the brands and the corporations that are they're putting a barrier in place. And that's why, you know, telling these garment worker stories is so important, because it removes that barrier that the brands have put between us and the people that make our clothes.
Absolutely.
Jessica from Argentina, I'm going to come to you next.
Yes, I recognize as consumers, we think that no brand is going to listen us, that we don't not have the power as individuals to change anything. But on the contrary, and even more so with the social networks, brands can easily find out about our discontent and even change our habit of consumption. The power that we didn't have is enormous. That's why I recommend everyone to start asking their favorite brand who may make clothes, and even choose to buy local brands and small business. The more we are, the message will get through faster.
Great advice. Yeah, that question of who made my clothes is, I think, still just as important as it was back in 2014 when Fashion Revolution began. Aram, Turkey, I will come to you next.
Yeah, actually, there was a great line on the fanzine. Every time we buy something, we are voting with our wallets. If an item is selling very well, brands continue to produce that one. So with conscious choices, actually, we can affect the brands to produce more sustainably and responsibly made products. And in the textile industry, we've been talking about environmental issues for a long time, but the social ones are relatively new and have started with the internet and social media, basically, of course, because in some way they increase the transparency and force that brands to be more transparent. So we, as citizens, as customers, we can use our money and our voice for the workers in the supply chain. And I agree that the labels say what's in it, but they don't say how it's made. So I believe in the power of asking questions, because in this way we can hold these brands accountable for their actions. But on the other hand, of course, it's not enough. We should ask these questions to our governments, our institutions, some global organizations to take an action. Because the issue, I think, is not only about the brands, the fast fashion global brands, but also all other stakeholders in the industry. We should involve them all.
Absolutely agree. We need a total collaborative effort with such a big industry across the world. Mary Beth from Scotland, I will come to you next.
I think that we need to do a lot more thinking about power beyond the money, beyond simply your power of spending. I think that we, especially the young people, especially young people that get involved in Fashion Revolution, that power that we have to articulate, to educate others, to share better practices. So using designers that are creatives, that are finding better practices, to share that, to share encouragement with each other, to start up our own brands, to start up new research, to take on that new social enterprise, to do new projects. And overall, just like building new and better communities. I think a lot of the time we talk about ourselves as an echo chamber, and it's almost like a what's the word I'm looking for? Self-deprecating way of us basically saying that we're building a really successful community here. Like, yeah, okay, the work of that community is to continuously go outside that echo chamber, but that community is power. Like, that's what we are creating here. And everyone, no matter if it's a 17-year-old who has left school and is at the very beginning of their journey with not even knowing what their higher education looks like, or if they want to do that at all, and right up to the academics, every single one of those people in these communities have a level of power. And so if you're really good at sharing knowledge, share those tools and those skills with other people. If you're really on the ball with new, more sustainable practices to do with creating textiles or design, share that with other people. And I think that's where our power will come from. And that's where the real change is going to start like beginning, is when we really just start, we're building these communities just now, but when they just start to really naturally keep sharing and growing, I think that's where our power comes in more. And that's the way that we defeat the larger brands and the larger structures, by showing that there are better ways to do things.
Totally agree. I think, yeah, as you said, especially young people that come into this, they think, well, I can't afford to buy a really expensive, sustainably made pair of jeans, but they still have power in other areas of their life and sort of spheres of influence. Singapore, let's get your perspective on how we can kind of use our power as consumers and citizens.
Yeah, I think my first sort of interpretation of this question when I heard it is that I think for someone just like general members of the public, when you think about power and this power imbalance and this imbalance in power dynamics within the fashion industry, it feels like an issue that's way too big to even grasp. It's so difficult to visualize yourself as just a participant within the fashion industry when it's such an opaque and such a industry that just, drives on being opaque, so and not transparent. So I think my way of going about it is to always remind people that we're not just consumers of clothes, but also not just consumers of fashion, but wearers of clothes. So it's almost like going back to oneself and to connect and to form this very symbiotic relationship with ourselves and our clothes and with nature and our environment. I think once we return to oneself, once we do that, I think it's a lot easier to sort of not in like a selfish or like an extremely removed point of view way, but in more of like, okay, let's set intentions, let's be more intentional with, say, consumption, with being better wearers for our clothing and things like that, and then have that extend into other aspects of how we see the industry and how we interact with fashion. And then I think it would be a very gradual process, but we would start to see this this connection and this relationship that fashion has with other intersecting social issues, social and environmental issues. So I believe that it's all of what everyone said, but also that returning to oneself and like almost like reclaiming this agency and believing that we can do that despite what everyone's telling you that you cannot. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. It's sort of getting rid of that identity of consumer who's kind of at the will of advertising and saying, actually, I'm a person and I can do quite a lot of things.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Madupe from Nigeria, can we come to you next?
So I think that the consumers have the power, because there's no fashion business without consumers. Consumers still have to consume. So I think that consumers should keep asking the question, who made my clothes? What's in my clothes? And I also think that as much as we shop from positive, from brands that have positive impacts, social and environmental impacts, these brands as well, there should be transparency, because when I shop from a sustainable brand, I want to see that my actions translate into better working conditions for garment workers. So I think that transparency is very important on the part of the brands and the government as well. I think that there should be policies that mandate living conditions and better living conditions for workers. And I also think that the legal minimum wage should be a living wage, because I think that's where this problem stems from. Because if the legal minimum wage is not a living wage, a lot of people would pay that that wage, and at the end of the day, it will still not be a living wage for the garment workers. And so I think the government has a part to play, as well as the brands and the consumers. But ultimately, the consumers have the great power.
USA, Mackenzie, let's come to you next.
Yeah, this is a wonderful conversation. One additional thing is just, I think a lot of people can feel overwhelmed with, okay, I realize I have the power, I realize I can make a difference, and what do I do now? I mean, there are wonderful ways online to take action through all of Fashion Revolution's hashtag campaigns. There are wonderful ways offline to take part. So writing to your policymaker, having conversations with your neighbor, but at the end of the day, recognizing what's meaningful about this fashion industry and pushing for change, and what you most gravitate to, I think that gives a lot of agency for pushing for results and not feeling like you have to do everything all at once all the time, because if everyone did that, we'd all be burned out in half a day. It would be quite a lot. So I think recognizing what you can make a difference in and pursuing that route, educating others while you're doing it is so important to just the sustainability of yourself among pushing for the sustainable fashion industry.
I love that. Yeah, it's lots of people doing small things rather than a small amount of people doing everything. Jessica from South Africa, are you there? Oh, there you are.
I'm here. Sorry, I'm having such connecting issues, but I think I'll just touch on what everybody said. I know I missed the first point when you, I think when you called out my name. I think on that one, just sort of to take everyone back just quickly, I just thought it was very interesting, particularly for us in South Africa when COVID hit, how, we all moved into our little caves and forgot all about the seamstresses and the tailors and, everybody just like kind of disappeared and they didn't have that traffic, that they were used to in terms of making clothes for people. So that was just very interesting observation in terms of how even in the midst of a pandemic, they were really also forgotten. I think the big brands focused on, how they can make a turnaround system for their brands. But I think for the people on the ground who work outside of like, whether it's flea markets or, all these, or whether secondhand shop expos, all these little corners somewhere outside of retail, I think they were forgotten. But just to touch on the point of what we're talking about now, I think I always find it just so interesting how we take it for granted, just the power of this idea about newness. I think as much as we would like to transform the system and get people, to decrease on overconsumption, I think all of us, in a way, it's almost like we're addicted to something that is new. And we need to really explore a whole lot of that in terms of why. What is it about something that is new that serves a better purpose than something that is worn or something that is used? And I think that's where the power lies. If we can, everybody, if we can just like try and internalize that and spend time there. And lastly, I think I agree with someone earlier on once spoke about I think it's Singapore spoke about this idea about, we are also the wearers. And I would take it further in terms of, I think we need to also realize that we can take our power back. Power also lies in how long you wear your clothes. It's really taking your power, and saying, no, I bought this, I spent money on it, and I will wear it as much as I want. I will repeat it. I will have outfit repeats. I will go to the wedding with the same outfit 10 times and nobody's going to tell me anything. So I think it's little things like that we take for granted. We really need to bring that power. For me, money, fashion power, that power for me speaks about that, like taking the power back. I've spent money on it so I can do whatever it is that I want with it, but that includes making sure that I utilize the garment to its full potential, so yeah, so I just thought that was just very interesting, that things that came up for me.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's really good to hear your perspective. And I love that idea of using your power by wearing those clothes as long as possible and making them last as well. Trambo, sorry, I haven't come to you yet, Zambia.
Okay, so for me, I think what is sounding very similar from all of our opinions and in terms of where power lies is the educational system, design schools, tailoring schools. If we change the structure of our educational systems, because we're taught fashion marketing 101 is always fine, create something new, create a buzz around it and make people believe they need it. That's what you're taught in fashion marketing. So if you transform a fashion marketing module and syllabus to have the educational part about your digital footprint, your sustainability impact, how much fabric waste goes into these things. Because there was a book I was reading, I was hoping to find it by now, but I read it a really long time ago, where it talked about the amount of clothing we already have in the world could last us for the next 2 to 3, 4 decades. So why are we still producing clothes when there's already enough to basically last until our great grandkids arrive on this earth, And understanding that the fashion industry, as much as I'm part of it, as much as I love it, it has this system of teaching you the illusion that you need something that you do not, and that major brands are inaccessible to the consumer, which is not true, because obviously you have your fashion designers with their individual Facebook and Instagram pages, which they run themselves. It starts from there. Talk to the fashion designer. Have you ever thought about the fashion industry in this perspective and how it's affecting the world, and what are you going to do to change the conversation? Because when it comes to major clothing brands, we have multiple designers working for all these brands like H&M and all those ASOS.com. That's not just one designer. It's not one designer that designs for the whole H&M, because there are multiple. Hundreds and thousands of us are hired at a time to work for a specific brand for one season. And those designs will either get passed on or approved and all of that. So it starts with understanding that as a consumer, you do have access to these people. Even a manufacturing manager, even a production manager in a store, you have easy access to them. It's just that you're told that you don't, so you don't even bother trying. And I think once you take ownership that actually I do have a way of reaching these people and starting these conversations, you're going to see the way it's going to transform how they feel about how they're impacting the world. Because no fashion designer wants to be associated with a bad image or bad cred in terms of damaging the earth. So I think that is one way to look at it as well.
I think that's really interesting, actually, because probably the lack of transparency from brands also extends to its employees. A lot of the time they don't necessarily know what's going on in the supply chain. So that's a great point. I've just realized we're like really running out of time. The conversation's just been flowing. So I just have one final question for everybody, which is if you could tell people in your country, one action that they can take to, make a difference this Fashion Revolution Week, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Mankiran.
I think while the campaigns are there for social media and digital sharing, I definitely do believe that it's about word of mouth. So if I am the one who, part of such a revolution for that matter, if I am doing something right now and my friends are aware that this is what I'm doing, it's not like in a day it's going to change, but the more conversations you have, the more you share about. For example, we recently did Loved Clothes Last, and we shared how writing love letters to your 10-year-old denim jacket that I have worn through like so many of my night outs with friends, so there's so many stories associated with it, and everybody suddenly was talking about something that they've loved and had for so many years, right? So I think it's sharing in person through word of mouth with your friends, and the ripple effects are going to be there, because while you do this all online, we have so much content flowing digitally that there's overconsumption literally on the digital platform as well as it is in the real world. I think talking to somebody, sharing these stories without really telling them that you're trying to change it or they should do this to make it, they are going to feel a certain shift in their own behavior over a period of time. So I think that is really important.
Perfect. That's a really easy one for everyone to have. Just one small conversation with somebody in your life, I think, can make quite a huge difference. Yeah. Argentina, Jessica, let's go to you next.
Thanks. And I think that the first and more important thing we have to do is inform ourselves. Read the fanzine of the Fashion Revolution, read a book, watch documentaries, testimonies, investigate, draw our own conclusion and feed our critical thinking. This is the more important for me. We must be informed, and we really, or what is really is ethical fashion and what is not. It seems easy, but of course it's not, and this information will be very useful to use in this system that use marketing tools for this information and excessive greenwashing that we see every day.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. Turkey, Iram, let's go to you next.
Yeah, actually, before sharing my thoughts on this, I want to mention a little bit quickly about one issue. The brands. The brands really have to change their purchasing practices. They force the suppliers for lower cost and shorter deliveries, but yet they demand lots of standards, lots of certifications and audits from them. Even the manufacturers vary widely, such as big and integrated ones, smaller ones, and some other cooperatives with home workers, for example. The brands try to check all the boxes in the very same list to work with them. I think we still don't understand that the issue is our perspective. We can solve human exploitation just by using technology or checking boxes in the same list. We need to slow down our system. For example, today in Turkey is one of the biggest textile producers in the world, but again, we can't find high quality clothes very easily here. Out of context, even the low quality ones are very expensive here due to high currencies and inflation rate. But the current system with its speed and scale doesn't work for anyone, but the owners of the global brands, by the way. Also, it has turned into an industry where skilled labor is underestimated and lost. And of course, it affects the quality of our clothes. So I think it's time to break our addiction to the need for speed and volume, as the fanzine said, to appreciate high quality garments and the skilled labor. And for answering the questions, I think, again, the starting point is the brand. So please ask your questions to them about your favorite item, for example, by posting on social media or sending messages, emails, demands such as who made my clothes, how much did you pay for making this item to the maker, and what are your regulations to avoid exploitation in your supply chain, for example. Don't think that it's just an email, it's just a message. Brands are listening to you, and so use your voice.
Yeah, that actually goes to one of the questions that came up on YouTube, was about, does it actually work to, email these brands? Do they actually change their ways? And we can say yes, because we have run our fashion transparency index every year, and we see progress every year because people are holding those brands accountable for what they're telling us. We have brands asking us every day what they can do to do better, and brands really do listen to their customers. So definitely don't think that those things don't matter, because every email, every social media post, that all counts. So thank you for that, Iram. Mary Beth, let's hear, what do you want people in Scotland to do this Fashion Revolution Week?
Read more about garment workers. Read more about their lives and about their families, about their level of education, the space that they have made a home. Beyond the Garment Worker Diaries, which is an incredible project and has like an abundance of information that might almost be a bit too overwhelming. The excerpts that are in the Money Fashion Power fanzine, but as well, year on year around the anniversary of Rana Plaza, there are really like in-depth articles that come out by different journalists, and almost all of them will have at least one profile of typically a woman telling you about her children and about her family and about what it's like for her working in that space. And I think that that breeds connection, and it's where our compassion will start to grow. It's where you can sincerely share with others about the experiences of mainly these women. And I think as well that'll grow with, it'll keep reminding us as well of the immediacy of this change that's needed. Is when you keep remembering beyond the statistics back to like the individuals, and keep on a really personal like going back to that sort of like spiritual level of keeping it on a personal level, of that being, it could be the people that work very, very locally to us, and that's their experiences, and it's people that we should care about and we should be fighting for change for.
Thank you so much for that. It's such a great, empowering note to end on. Sing from Singapore, can we hear your one action that people should take?
Yeah, I think on top of everything that everyone's already said, I think I would love for people in Singapore to find your own like fashion communities. I think here at Fashion Revolution Singapore, we've been trying to build our own fashion community. Like we've set up like a Discord server / channel, trying to organize people in that way, to create like a safe space for people to come together and to ask questions, sort of huddle together and make mistakes together and learn together in that sense. I think it's so important to have our own little communities, especially when we are trying to, I think it was Mackenzie that mentioned in the previous answer that it's really easy to get burnout if you try to do everything all by yourself. But if you sort of like distribute all of this throughout the community and with, you know, the people that are closest to your social circles, and like trying to form our own little families, I think it's going to make things a lot easier, and, you know, the revolution would be a lot more facilitated in that way.
I love that. Yes, we need to find our communities, and social media is a great place to start, but definitely in your local area as well. Medipe, Nigeria, can we hear your one action, please?
Thank you. So I think that we need to keep up the conversation of our impacts, or what the impacts of our actions when in the fashion industry, because I think that as consumers, we need to know how. A lot of people don't really know how their actions impact the fashion industry. So I think we need to keep up that conversation of who made my clothes, what's in my clothes, and, you know, who made my fabric. And also, there's something peculiar about Nigeria, and that's where we have when we have parties, we usually have like something called ashwebi, where we buy uniform fabrics and make styles. I feel that actions like that we need to talk about those actions, and we need to really scale down on that, because at the end of the day, we don't necessarily need everything that we buy, and we need to scale down on these habits and, you know, reduce it. And I think that when we speak about it, when we talk about these conversations, people would understand better and know how to deal with things like that, and how their impacts, even though it's little, can, you know, bring about a greater effect on the fashion industry. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jessica, are you there from South Africa? Can we get your action to take away?
Yes, I'm here. I think one of the most important things for us, I think, in Africa is really recognizing that Africa has always been sustainable. And I think really identifying those areas that we can push forward and continuously encourage people to keep those norms and those customs that we've always done. But I also think that on a subjective level, someone who's like a former fashion editor, I think is really just encouraging people to continue, you know, those little acts that they've always done in their wardrobes, you know, because we, you know, all of us, you know, we have like this little activities that we do daily, you know, in terms of how we're sustainable, you know, and I think it's really just recognizing those and pushing them forward and realizing that we are in a way living the lifestyle within our little world. It's really just a matter of encouraging other people to join in. So I think we all need to start where we are and keeping those and realizing, particularly for Africa, I'm just passionate about the fact that we've always been sustainable. You know, it's just a matter of how do we really now make an impact, particularly with the climate change.
That's a really great point, that actually some of those old ways I think in every country, traditions, that we can look back to. I think about Scotland because I used to be part of Fashion Revolution Scotland too, and the amazing textile traditions that have just been lost, the tweeds and the wools and the tartans. I think every country has those amazing traditions that perhaps aren't being passed on to new generations. So I think everybody can learn from what Jessica's just said there as well. Mackenzie, can I get your final thought, please?
Yeah, thank you. Everyone's shared wonderful tips for actions to take. And I would say within the US, there's a lot of energy around policy right now, both at the state and federal levels. So as this news comes out, I would encourage folks to call your policymakers, to write your policymakers. Those actions outside of the digital space, although tagging them on Twitter and Instagram does make a difference, actually reaching their offices on the phone and via written letters makes a really, really big impact. So I would say to stay tuned for policy news coming, and just know that your pen and your voice can make a difference.
I love that. Yeah, there's some really exciting developments coming out of the US that we're watching eagerly. Twambo, Zambia, can we get you as the last but not least final thought to end on?
Okay, well, mine would be basically to encourage Zambians to go back to your roots. As Jessica has already pointed out from South Africa, we are already somewhat sustainable. So understanding that you don't need to fit into a trend, because a trend is forever changing. So you don't have to constantly run with the wind. Sometimes stopping helps you appreciate life a bit more. It helps you appreciate your garment, because this thing of rushing and trying to buy the next new thing is something Zambians seem to like to do. And I would just encourage Zambians to pause and take a break, look at your garment, understand the inner workings of it, and spend time understanding what you already have in your closet. And also to, as everybody else has mentioned, I would say to talk to the governments, write letters to the ministries about all the secondhand clothing dumping that happens almost daily into the country, and kind of have policies around how much of that can be happening within Zambia, so that we are not contributing to a bigger problem for our kids and our future grandkids and the environment and the world as a whole. So definitely just understand where you come from and understand there's value in passing that knowledge on. The history of fashion is super important, and it will also help you understand how to pause, how to take a break, and how to make less of a digital impact on the world in such a negative way.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing that. I feel like anyone watching this now or later on, when it's up on YouTube, we'll have tons of actionable steps to take away. My final step is to read the fanzine, which is available as digital download, where you can either pay what you want or pay nothing. We also, I believe, have a couple of copies remaining, print copies that are limited edition if you're in the UK. So make sure to jump on that during Fashion Revolution Week. And also make sure to follow all of our country teams on social media. They're all doing lots of events and activities this week and throughout the year as well. So be sure to connect with not just Fashion Revolution, but Fashion Revolution Turkey, Argentina, Scotland, Singapore, Zambia, USA, Nigeria, India, and South Africa, and many more countries as well. So yeah, that's us. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me, and I hope everyone enjoyed themselves.